Reincarnated as a sword, aka What? I died and became a magical cruise missile in the shape of a sword, aka Fran and Her Sword Dad, is a 2022 anime series produced by Studio C2C and based on the light novel by Yu Tanaka. It is quite simply the second anime in the isekai genre where I have come to a particular realization. It's where I learned to stop worrying and love the isekai. Because of the absolute glut of isekai anime over the last, decade or so, it has been a pretty common opinion, even on this channel, to speak of isekai as a genre in a negative light. Many isekai shows feel like trend chasers that have barely any passion in them. They do some kind of paint by numbers story with archetype heavy characters and perhaps just one distinguishing quirk that sets it apart from its peers. That quirk either being a defining feature or just an interesting fact that stays relevant for maybe the first handful of plot threads until it too is retired and the story becomes even more paint by numbers like. Someone might look at Reincarnated as a Sword and assume no differently here. It is an isekai anime with the quirk in the very title. The protagonist is a sword. There's also a young girl wielder in most of the promo art that seems to have spent her life as a slave, because that's a trope we can't get rid of anymore. And on just that, we can probably name 10 plus other isekai that this story will either steal from directly or have been inspired by. Some people might believe that to be true and write the story off. They might not choose to bother with this series that has actually handled its slave aspect promptly and properly. They might not enjoy the passion of the pseudo-main character Fran as she struggles to become recognized as a strong fighter in this fantasy world. Or they will not witness the warmth that is the relationship she holds with the series' technical main character, Shisho. To those people, I say, you're missing out. Today we are going to briefly look at this series with that lens, and perhaps, like me, you will simply need to learn to stop worrying and love the isekai. That's why we would like to thank the sponsor for this video today, Refantasia, Charm and Conquer. Similar to the show that we are talking about today, Refantasia covers the story of an isekai protagonist, you, in this case. But instead of being dropped into the body of a sword like Shisho, in Refantasia you get isekai'd by everyone's favorite truck and land in a world of fantastic heroes and conflicting factions. Throughout the game, you assemble your team of heroes and fight battles to protect your new stronghold. But you don't just assemble them, of course. That would be too easy for a mobile game. Oh no, you need to level them, earn their loyalty, win their hearts, build a harem. Wait, no, that's exactly what you do. They even call it that. Collect gold to finance your new kingdom, make important decisions that affect your realm, wander around until you find someone who fancies you, charge headfirst into battle with your armies. There's so much to do. I know that being a lord over any size of kingdom is a difficult and stressful job, but man, is there not much of a break in this early game. Let me spend time with the harem. Why else would you even give me that option? Unlike this game's protagonist, however, you do not need to get hit by a truck to experience this world. Instead, all you need to do is follow the link in the description to download your copy of Refantasia, Charm and Conquer. Absolutely free, available for both Android and iOS. There will, in the description, also be a bonus code that will unlock some special rewards. But you'll have to try it out to see exactly what those rewards are. I don't even know. I didn't get a copy of the code early, so I couldn't tell you even if I wanted to. It'll be a surprise for all of us. Thank you very much to Refantasia for sponsoring the video. Here is a brief list of things that you can expect from Reincarnated as a Sword. Goblins, Illidan Stormrage cosplayers, slavery, making curry, Whip Mommy and her one-hit KO multi-attacks, a distinct lack of truck-kun, the realization that in Japanese, Shisho shares a voice with Team Rocket's James, and finally, just Fran. In my quest to stop worrying and love the isekai, this series was my second stop. We might discuss my first stop in a future video as soon as its soon-to-be-released next season comes out. Please look forward to it. On the surface, Reincarnated as a Sword, hereafter referred to as Sword Dad, contains very little that one might consider to be groundbreaking, goated, or even the best of the year. But the first realization that I needed to come to with was that not everything I watch not everything I watch needs to fit that description. In fact, quite a few anime over the years that people have described to me as groundbreaking, goated, or even best of the year, I have either only slightly enjoyed at best and dragged myself through at worst. Sword Dad is essentially a murder hobo plot, wrapped in the traditional gaming mechanics the isekai genre has become known for, even if the setting is not actually a video game or some kind of virtual reality. That's a new trope that's not going away either. The show's main protagonist, Shisho, gets traditionally isekai'd and dumped into the body of a sword with a bit of a major cheat, because all main isekai protagonists needs to have at least one, in that he is a sword that can absorb the magic crystals of beasts and other enemies, becoming stronger, but also gaining the skills and abilities of those he slays. Quickly, he finds himself with the telekinetic ability, which gives him freedom of movement, and thus begins a montage of him absolutely murdering all high-level monsters within range of his pedestal. That is, until he finds himself trapped by a mana-draining ability that keeps him immobile until he can be picked up. Enter Fran. Fran is a black cat slave recently escaped from her masters and on the run, who by narrative coincidence happens to run into Shisho at both of their most vulnerable moments. After quick introduction, Fran releases Shisho from his somewhat self-inflicted torment, and they begin a coexisting relationship to allow Fran to become stronger than what she could have ever possibly have hoped for beforehand. Because, you know, Shisho is a sword, and at this point, he doesn't have much else better to do. Also because I've been referring to this show as Sword Dad, and he latches on to Fran appropriately in this regard. Notice that I said appropriately. He has not latched onto her inappropriately, like some other anime that I probably could name, that I actually think at this point has been far removed, so a lot of my viewers won't actually know it, but that's okay. Just know that their relationship is entirely say-so, and not in a VTuber that says say so, but actually isn't kind of way. The thing that stops this series from being fully murdo hobo is, oddly enough, Shisho himself. Fran does become perfectly willing and able to be that one D&D gremlin we either know or hear stories about that just wants to go dungeon diving for EXP and items without a care for any other things that the world might offer, except perhaps maybe food. But her respect for Shisho and Shisho's own cool head keeps her from going on a rampage towards anyone who rubs her the wrong way. Despite her abilities and tendencies, though, we still get to see the essential protagonist of this series, Fran, struggle quite a bit. Usually our protagonists in isekai don't struggle all that much unless, you know, the show makes a specific point about it. Shisho is, quite frankly, a cheat code that grants her abilities far greater than most inhabitants of this world, but the narrative tries its best to showcase that without one another, both of these two characters have enough major flaws that would eventually get them killed. A sword that could level entire cities is crazy powerful, but it needs a wielder to not get suddenly nerfed into irrelevance. And a swordswoman who can clash blades with the best of them is only as strong as the sword she brings into the fight. There is a surprising amount of depth to their relationship. It is quite symbiotic in many ways, and I feel like that is the actual main selling point of the whole show. Sure, there are cool fights. The music is amazing, though I am partial to any music with choir vocals. The father-daughter relationship of Fran and Shisho is really what I keep watching this show for. Perhaps it is that relationship that I relate to on a number of levels. Yeah, I don't talk about my personal life, but I am a dad, actually. Fun fact. Plus, besides even all of that, Fran, as a character, is just the best.
Dungeon Master, Dungeon Master.
Seeing her struggle at times and then seeing her overcome those struggles is just chef's kiss. Good entertainment. Like, I've already seen some people complain because, well, the internet, complain that she has an overpowered sword, so of course she is going to win all of her fights. OP swords do that. It's boring. But that's the thing, she doesn't always win. And the story has been quite good at pitting her and Shisho up against enemies that are at least on par with, if not stronger than the both of them combined. Like, it's no different from a sports anime or some other type of competitive or action series. Protagonists usually have some level of plot armor, and the chances that they win like all of their battles because of that is extremely high. But it's always how they win that makes the difference. If Fran and Shisho just waltzed into and then out of dungeons like they owned the place, I would agree that it would be extremely boring, or at least could be. We might come back to that in a later video. But here, that's not what happens. They may waltz into a dungeon without a care in the world, but getting back out is something that's already proven to them to be a challenge. That said, if this was an original anime and not an adaptation, I would actually be seriously worried about Fran's safety in this narrative, because we've never been promised that Fran would live. She's in fact been given several death flags that in any other series probably would have seen her be killed off, and as much as I feel like the royal we who watch this show look at Fran as the real protagonist of this series, by all accounts, it's the sword Shisho that is the protagonist, and he can be wielded by anyone. Fran could die, and Shisho could be wielded by somebody else, and the story could still continue. Now, having not read the original material, it is possible that this could still happen, but I have a feeling that a spoiler that big would have been let fly by someone on the internet at this point, considering how long that the series has been running for. So that hasn't happened. Plus, if that character swap was in the cards, I feel like it would have happened by now. Otherwise, there would be the risk of a reader revolt by hardcore Fran fans. I'm included in that. The last thing that I've become quite interested in, though, even though I doubt that the show will even cover it in this season, assuming we get more after this season, which is just how this world exists. There has already been a small amount of time spent on the gods of this world, specifically the goddess of chaos who created the dungeons of the world in the first place. What I actually love is how the characters talk about this goddess of chaos. Despite dungeons being extremely dangerous and summoning monsters and demons that could destroy entire civilizations, the goddess of chaos who creates these dungeons, or is at least responsible for them, is not spoken about negatively. She's not talking about like some kind of malevolent deity out to destroy the world. Instead, there's a much more respected tone that people take. When asked, one character even talks about her like she is just testing the inhabitants of the world with these dungeons that she creates. She is not necessarily good or evil, but just some kind of neutral entity that judges the strength of those who live in this world. And I find that fascinating. We actually haven't seen much real evil in this world, though there are some clearer examples of bastards who do exist than others. The slavers in the intro, for example, are one. Though honestly, I did find it amazing how Fran's experience with the slavers and being a slave herself didn't taint her outlook on the world. Now that could just be the writer's choice in order to not dwell on such negativity, but having her gain such an optimistic view of life and the world despite her life's stories is quite nice. Heck, even the scary boss-like Ilian Storm Rage inspired demon has a kind of honor to him. Like, he wanted to destroy entire cities once he got out of the dungeon. Yeah, sure, great. But at no point did he disrespect this girl who waltzed into his room. He could have looked down on her and insulted her ability, her race, her anything, honestly, but he didn't. He was powerful enough to realize that she would have needed a particular level of strength to reach him, and he, at the very least, respected that, which is something many of the other characters did not give Fran at first glance. It's these little things that I am finding with this show and Isekai nowadays that do keep me invested and honestly make me want to stop looking at the genre as negatively as I have and as bad as some people tend to do. Yes, of course, there are always going to be bad isekai, lazy isekai, uninspired isekai that come along, and I would not be one to say that Reincarnated as a Sword is a series that is a must-watch for most people, but it is still, in my mind, a positive example of something good about the genre, and something that, for those willing to give it a chance, is worth watching. In conclusion, I will continue to watch it. I do get that kind of disappointed feeling whenever an episode of this show ends, and I just want more, but have to wait. And I find that feeling to always be a good barometer on whether or not I like a series enough. And it'll only make things worse once this brief cour of episodes ends and we don't get any more of this story adapted. Which, honestly, I think is the only reason I would tell people not to watch this series. Because if you aren't willing to afterwards move on to the source material, this adaptation will probably end either on a cliffhanger or in some other unsatisfying read the light novel kind of way, and it'll just be disappointing. I can hope, however, that this will not be the case. I can hope that we can see Fran and her sword dad continue to face stronger challenges both together and individually, because Fran herself is becoming strong on her own. And eventually, I feel like she'll be able to confidently enter a fight and do something like say, "Hey dad, look! No hands!" Yeah, that was in poor taste. But before you go, a quick thank you to all of my patrons who make videos like this possible and give me the ability to feed myself. Thank you all so much. If you are not already a patron, there will be a link below the description, so if you feel like helping out, and of course, a very special thanks to those patrons who help out just a little bit more. Specifically, Hector Montemayor, Wago221, City Yamako, Rifen Bonaparte, Ross Emerson, and Omar Showman for being extremely awesome. And until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, watch more anime and stay frosty.